space, the final frontier, the intergalactic Milky Way of the galaxy. Sci-fi and retrofuturism in video games have always been a fascinating concept in my humble opinion. One of the first video games I played within the realm of sci-fi was Blasto on the PS1. I fondly remember countless hours of running through levels without a care in the world. I felt like the true underdog, the true overpowered and big spaceman on campus that blasted everything in sight when I had my phasers set to kill. It was a surprisingly simple yet fun platformer that permeated around my mind still to this day. Likely, this game hasn't aged well, considering the leap of technology that we have now in present day. Although, I would assume that the controls are probably still kinda spotty versus modern standards as well. What lies beneath is still a beating heart that had passion poured into it deeply. That game unlocked some fragmented memories of joy and excited me due to my past with sci-fi media at large. Naturally speaking, I started off like everyone else when my affinity came from George Lucas's Star Wars being a cultural sensation. I almost swore that the Earth stood still when Star Wars Episode 1 came out for the first time. The Phantom Menace was just a fucking masterclass sensation to a lot of people in the world that was eagerly looking forward to that movie. I seen it everywhere, whether it was on McDonald's merch, Happy Meals, whether it was seeing Jar Jar Binks' fucking bug eyes all over plastic cups, whether it was seeing various commercials. The unshakable feeling of hype was still obvious to a lot of people. This was a lot more popular than I realized, and it was only going to be a matter of time before I was personally indoctrinated into the Star Wars franchise. Memories came rushing back like a truck on the freeway with no headlights. A slight bit of shame almost washed over me in this particular department. I thought that episode 1 was okay. I didn't love it like most people did, like my peers did. The science fiction elements were nice, and the final battle gave me an ultimate euphoria. When that final lightsaber duel happened with Darth Maul and the Jedi, I was so fucking hyped at that moment, despite thinking the movie was okay at best. It definitely had some slow and plodding elements. My mouth couldn't really speak what was on my mind because I didn't want to disappoint my peers because they loved it. So I wanted to be happy just for them. I kept my opinions to myself on this film, but the characters, the lore, and the backstory still made me wonder how deep did the Star Wars mythos go. And that's when I discovered the older films for the first time in history. I remember being absolutely floored and dropping my jaw at the plot reveals of those movies, especially when Darth Vader confidently proclaimed that he was the father of Luke Skywalker. I feel like this is thoroughly important because my nerd culture interests eventually evolved over time as video games and movies became common law for me. I had so many interchangeable aspects, so many new franchises I got into simply from being a moviegoer. This is where video game adaptations kicked in because, lo and behold, transmedia marketing is a thing upon branding. Playing the Back to the Future game was a pretty goddamn awful experience on the NES though. I remember shunning the hell out of this game up and down the street as people, cars, traffic, and cats all blocked Marty McFly's path. After tossing the NES game in the trash, I remember being morbidly curious that my grandfather left a copy behind of Back to the Future on the VHS. It was almost like a reverse cycle came into play. I said to myself, no way is this movie remotely close to being as terrible as the game was. Lucky number 7 hit my divine intervention like a pool of gold. I swear to God, Marty McFly's journey in that movie, the first film, couldn't have hit me faster than a lightning bolt at the clock tower. I fell in love with this film due to the concept at the time. The chemistry of the characters was also like pretty cool, and it was wild how a situation like this began story-wise, where Marty McFly had to get his parents back together or else they would vanish out of existence. My love for sci-fi began at Star Wars, but things began to double when I discovered Back to the Future films for the first time. The second film itself was caked with plenty of retro futurism within. Hoverboards getting displayed, these badass Nike shoes, and the concoction they did with Pepsi where they decided to make their brand called Pepsi Perfect. I was thinking to myself, is this what the future is going to be like as a kid from 1997? In 2015, are we gonna have like hoverboards along with Pepsi Perfect? Little did I know that the latter was already established. To me, retrofuturism is taking something from the past as perfect as product placement and establishing that to get brand identity. You know, people will be familiar with stuff like McDonald's, Adidas, Nikes, all that shit. And I understand after a while it could get overwhelming, but after that it would show these things are still kind of cool to certain people, and many eons later still be recognized as a brand. It makes your neurons go, oh, I had a pair of these fucking Adidas shoes in school, I had a pair of Nikes in school, I wanted those specific types. I owned a Walkman maybe at one point in my life. It makes you euphoric in a sense, and also it makes you feel nostalgia. It doesn't matter if you want to admit it or not. Consumerism is like a DNA in American culture, especially in a pretty capitalist society. There's almost a want, a need for mostly anything around here. It was only logical that the DNA for imprinting this in pop culture would happen. This is why it puzzles me that people are saying that this is a bad thing for Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet. As I digress, I don't think that product placement in retrofuturism is a bad idea, considering that you're supposed to make these things so people can notice on purpose. As long as it's not like, how do you do, fellow kids? Here's this thing, I'm gonna keep shoving it in your face over and over and over again, and it's like, we get it. As long as it's not like cringe and overstays as welcome, I'm fine with nostalgia when it is pertinent, when the shoe fits. But I guess the shoe fitting in this case would be a well-known Adidas shoe, right? Okay, so well fucking known and well fits. I am morbidly curious about all things related to Intergalactic. All the product placement talk aside, one of the curious things about this game is the lore they're setting up and the gameplay. And that makes me very curious, like, how is this all going to be coordinated? This whole equalizer sword, is there going to be some rhythm or music elements to this game as we discover time and time again as we go along? Like, what are they setting up here? Because they're doing these unique sci-fi weapons, clearly more melee focus, which is basically, I mean, there was melee in Last of Us Part 2 and there was melee in Uncharted, but it wasn't a central focus over the gunplay. There is a gun on the side of the hip of Jordan A. Munn. How does that function? Will there be customization? Will we be able to go into the realm of other planets? Possibly. I doubt it. I think we're gonna stick to this desolate portion of the map, and maybe it's gonna be like very wide, almost open world, because I remember statements of Druckmann being pretty much enthused by Elden Ring. I would also imagine that it would be a missed opportunity for plot elements itself if they didn't explore the desolate part. This is a planet that has gone dark for like 600 years. It means that it will likely have some inhabitants that are impressed by Jordan A. Munn's tech and gear in some kind of fashion. I would imagine maybe they want to rob her, maybe they don't know what she's rocking with the whole Walkman aspects or whatever. Maybe she'll pull like a Sony Walkman. There'll be music. They're doing music by like Trent Reznor, and he worked on some of the Quake soundtracks, and I think that's fucking awesome. I think that's cool to see. How will these people react to an able-bodied and capable bounty hunter for the first time in history? I'd assume these people could be scared, or maybe they have like no intelligence. They are sort of brainless, brainwashed people, maybe just robots infecting them or something like that when you encounter them. When you think of this old world and how bad stuff is getting and how it might be deteriorating from the seams, that's an interesting concept I want to see explored with this game deeply. With my own eyes, I want to see what they do with it. Naughty Dog is more or less a huge component for storytelling media after Uncharted. Extremely laser focused cinematic stories with characters that are interesting and larger than life. Now that life has grown and blossomed into this retro futurism flower in the realm of more environmental lore. And I think these things are interesting when done well. Some of my favorite hits feature capabilities like this with the Resident Evil franchise and God of War 2018. Those games will give you tons of exposition, whether it's about the creatures, the environment, the gods, the scientists, how certain people might have perished in an area, the exposition between Mimir and Kratos, and just when you think about like these two franchises or these two games in particular, between the Resident Evil game with a lot of lore behind it or God of War 2018, one thing they do in those is they tell you a lot, and sometimes they show you a lot too, and you can glean the picture from there that this place immerses you into the experience, the world, and what it has to offer, and you want to find out more. And having that immersive intrigue is very important. It paints a creative picture for why these areas or why these people or why these things exist in this nature, and that is good lore, and that is something I want to see permeate in this game, considering that Intergalactic will be the deepest Naughty Dog game, not only from a gameplay perspective but also probably from a lore perspective as well. I want to see this come into fruition. And as I said before, Druckmann is influenced by Miyazaki's take on Elden Ring. I believe we will see more environmental stories in Intergalactic more than ever before in this game. The origins of the machines, the origins of where Jordan's friends came from and why she's hunting one of her friends that is now turned into a convict for her to bounty hunt. Like, what's going on there? It's like they set up just enough nuggets to tell you there's fascinating things going on. There's not really a wide breadth of tons and slews of retro futurism titles on the gaming market. Sure, Intergalactic is not the most original thematic when it comes to what is out there right now, but compared to like how many people and their grandma decided to make a GTA clone, I still think it's kind of night and day. I do feel like there's a very distinctive thing that people should remember, and that is when their criticism is highlighted about this game being unoriginal as a theme, they should know that number one, most games have copied gameplay or thematics from other projects. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. We should be giving credit where credit is due. At the same time, at the same circumstance, we also need to realize that just because a thematic of gameplay or an element is copied, it doesn't mean that the copied homework is suddenly bad. For example, Batman Arkham has a pretty distinctive combat system that people copied, but Shadow of Mordor copies it and is still a good game in its own right. You see what I mean? I thoroughly believe that innovation can still occur with imitation. We could even have elements that weren't fully fleshed out by the first developer that pioneered an idea or premise. There are situations where people do not want to admit that another developer who imitates someone can somehow flesh out the idea that they worked on, or they can make a better gameplay premise overall. We've seen this idea unfold with Sleeping Dogs. When this game came into the picture, it could be used as a generalized GTA clone. That's completely fine if you feel that way. At the same time, the same general hand-to-hand combat in Sleeping Dogs is clearly superior when you compare this game to Grand Theft Auto. You could do environmental takedowns, heavy stuns, ground takedowns, slow motion finishers, etc. No matter how you slice it, GTA's combat is very surface level versus Sleeping Dogs. Number 2, Naughty Dog released The Last of Us at peak zombie genre fatigue. Look, it doesn't matter how you feel, it doesn't matter how you slice it. Countless people were already heavily invested into The Walking Dead in the early 2010s. So at that point, like, that was the most popular zombie show of all time. Afterwards, people were kind of getting burnt out by anything seen as less than subpar, right? You think about it now, when you go over to gaming, let's go to 2012, and you guys know what I'm about to talk about at this point. You guys know this genre was burnt out when this game came out. Guess what Capcom was doing? Look at what Capcom was doing in the early 2010s with Resident Evil. So Resident Evil 6. This is a series that is well known for impressive survival horror, a franchise that coined the term and reinvented horror gaming forever. Resident Evil 6 came out. That game did not set the world ablaze. That's how you could tell there was fatigue. It came out to pretty slightly above average scores, and it certainly didn't set the world on fire in gaming compared to The Last of Us when that released a year later. When The Last of Us Part 1 officially dropped, like the original, it got overwhelming acclaim, game of the year after game of the year after game of the year, sold tremendously, and everyone was saying, oh, the zombie genre is dead, we're burnt out, fuck it. I think fatigue is a misnomer. I think it does not exist if a really good product comes out, shows itself, and it turns out to be good. That's what people are missing. Like, the genre could be oversaturated, but you can still do something different sometimes, and you can still do something unique with that genre, which is what The Last of Us did with the hard-hitting emotional storytelling that made people go, oh, well, now we need to make hard-hitting emotional storytelling in our zombie video game stories now, right? That's what happened. So then we started to see people copy off of Naughty Dog. We started to see derivatives of derivatives with A Plague's Tale or God of War 2018 that focuses on the parent to child relationship within. This is nothing new, people. This is something that indeed does happen, and these games can find their own success even if they are derivative of something else, and they can make it work. It is possible. Some of them could fall flat on their face, other ones not so much. They turn out to be mega hits, mega successful, and they have a fan base. Now, as I said it before, and I'll say it again, it must be pretty painful to be sitting on a game as a development team for like 4 to 5 years as trends and fads overlap your work. James Gunn and the Guardians of the Galaxy phase is all but encapsulated in time 100%. This idea has been mostly taken, and now the Guardians of the Galaxy taking a niche Marvel group and making them like superstars, mainstream, with these retro futurist bounty hunters and these space people, and making them popular. Rocket Raccoon, Groot, Mantis, Gamora, Peter Quill, and Drax. For years and years and years, they've been getting super popular success. They have a successful video game. I understand that. And they showed what the underdogs could do in the world of space, time, and retro futurism. If I'm being real, at the same time, you could take any concept of storytelling and make it your own. As the above says, like, whether you love this studio or hate them, they beat out the tide of zombie fatigue. I wouldn't even remotely proclaim there is a fatigue for retrofuturism at all. Everyone knows I would kill for a Far Cry Blood Dragon 2. People would kill for another sequel to the Guardians of the Galaxy game that was critically acclaimed, etc. Who wouldn't want a great Cowboy Bebop game if executed properly? Last time I checked, Fallout is still very much beloved, and the list goes on and on and on. Coexistence is also a constant in this big reality we call space within the video game landscape. There is also a constant for those who don't believe that things can't coexist when they can. History has shown us this. If Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet continues to impress, then I'm getting it day one, no problem. If anything, I hope this game inspires more games to evolve, so it can flare up as more developers try their hand at retrofuturism. Influential tides are still rising in the gaming community, and it's the best thing about video games. If anyone can make a thematic good and make it their own, then I'm absolutely crazy about it. The possibilities in gaming are always endless, and so are ideas. I enjoy sci-fi, I enjoy retrofuturism, and I'll enjoy Galactic too. If you're inspired by Cowboy Bebop and Akira, then sign me the fuck up. I hope games are also more prosperous with these elements included. Take your own idea, take your own memory, bundle it up like a time capsule, and then pass it on to the future. I'm Renegade Operative, I'm signing out, and I cannot wait to see more retrofuturism games and sci-fi games, and sci-fi media in general. Live long and prosper. See you later. Also, PS, I thought the gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2 was good, and if Naughty Dog is enhancing that for Intergalactic, I fucking cannot wait to see what they do with melee, gunplay, and everything else in a sci-fi world. Also, sci-fi and horror, man, that shit is motherfucking Kino. Dead Space, Aliens, I didn't even talk about that yet. That could be a whole separate video, but in space, nobody can hear you scream. Whew, I think that's also untapped potential as well, and I'm kind of interested to see what Bloober Team does with Chronos the New Dawn. But just marking out, just saying, sci-fi horror and video games as well is just, oh man, it's just as good as film when really done well. The darkened corridors, the monsters around the corner, the fact that Zero G, nobody is coming to save you whatsoever. You are on your own. Anything bad could happen. Someone could blow a hole in the ship and you're fucking done for. It's just so many random and crazy elements you could do. And when you marry sci-fi horror and psychological horror, when you fuck with the mind and you fuck with the mind in space, oh my god, I could go on for hours upon hours gushing over that, but I wanted to say I'm pretty much a fan of that as well. Inject that more into my veins in the future going forward, because this thematic, man, it just will not slow down for me whatsoever when I pick subsects and subsections of horror and sci-fi and retrofuturism and everything involved, and I want to play more and more and more. Just what I should be doing, the questions I should be asking as a gamer. When is the next like fucking BioShock? I need to play that right now. All right, so you know how it is, man. I just cannot wait. Hopefully the future is bright once again for my relevant interest. As for the drama on Intergalactic, man, it's definitely what I expected already. I expected a lot of people to give a teaser trailer a 0 out of 10 as they're wagering the judgment of the full game itself, and I think that is a very, very weird thing to do. There's not even gameplay, so there's no other factual basis to call this game bad quite yet. I'm more in the camp of I'd rather give it a fair shake as opposed to these people that are quite ready to throw this game into the sun even after saying that Naughty Dog couldn't do a new IP. Now they've done one and they automatically reject it, which shows some leftover ire and frustration from people with The Last of Us Part 2, even though they likely didn't play that game and they likely will not be playing this one. As I said before, we've seen people judge a book by its cover, namely Silent Hill 2 Remake. We saw people say it's going to be a flop, a failure, it's not going to get any good scores whatsoever, and then the game comes out, critically acclaimed, fans like it, critics like it, it sold like 1 million immediately, versus Silent Hill 2's OG's like original lifetime. I think it sold way faster, which is pretty good so far, right? But there's still people kinda in denial about the game because it goes against their ideologies. I just say let the game speak for itself, and if you guys are wrong again, then well, I guess that means you're wrong. Men lie, women lie, but the numbers and success, if it turns out to be a success, that's not gonna lie to anybody. I honestly think people are already trapping themselves in a box if they're saying this is gonna be just like Concord, despite the fact that there's not a lot of high relevant interest into similar placed hero shooters versus single player narrative driven games that has a lot more of a success rate, especially from Naughty Dog, if The Last of Us Part 2 was considered to be a success as a single player game. So their last game like sold well, whereas Concord, it was a one and done, came out and flopped scenario. I think you guys are kind of comparing apples and oranges where it doesn't make sense whatsoever. You have a highly prestigious studio that got like Game of the Year over and over and over versus Concord that came and went and it got delisted. It's not even the same fucking comparison. It doesn't even make any sense when you think about it. But statements built on some false precognition, some illogical statement of what if, what could be, what I want to happen in the form of destructive criticism has never been 100% always sound logic. It's mostly just people throwing a dart at the board and hoping something will happen in that department because they dislike this studio. And let me tell you, that's not always a factual deal 100% of the time. This game could come out and be a smash hit for all we know, or it could be received well. I would say if this game even gets like at baseline a 9 out of 10, that's going to cripple a lot of people's like fragile mindset automatically, because what they pint the game to be, 0 out of 10s, 2 out of 10s, because of ideologies, etc., it never really came out in that fashion. You see what I'm saying? This is something people want to happen versus what could be a potential reality. I think it is more healthy to acknowledge and wait and see how the game releases, wait until state of plays, wait until announcements of a PlayStation showcase when they show off more of the game, and they will present more of the game. And then I think that's going to squash a lot of people's like mindsets, especially. What you're seeing is something that you saw outwardly with the last game that they made. So it's not really a surprise it's dragging on into this one. Everything in life and even in gaming is a wait and see affair. Will it fail? Maybe. Could it be a resounding success? Also maybe. I think it's best to treat the general outcome as 50-50 versus going all in and saying this game is going to be a 0, a flop, is going to not make any money, Concordian bucks, which is zeros. I don't think that's a good idea to say, because if it goes in a way where it's not what you think, you're gonna be mashing at the keyboard, all angry, working yourself up. It's not worth it, brother. It's not healthy. Focus on the games that you like eventually, right? You don't have to make like 100 videos on a game that you never were gonna buy in the first place. There's no need, right? I'll talk about a game I don't like for a while, and then I'll drop it off the face of the earth with that company and everything in it, because I don't want to buy that stuff anymore. I don't like Souls games. I don't buy Souls games religiously from Software anymore. So it's like, and I don't talk about it much on the channel. So if I can do it, you can do it. I don't understand the big major malfunction. Maybe some people just like controversy, which is why you're seeing what you're seeing here. Either way, dislike bombs are meaningless. We've seen games beat the allegations before, like Silent Hill 2 Remake, when that was dislike bomb for a while now, until the game came out and proved most people wrong. We need to see much more. I thoroughly believe that dislike bombs should not be justified unless we are dealing with a completely broken product, unless we are dealing with something that is a complete scam, like the day before, where it's an asset flip, it's a scam. They tried to scam people out of their money for one of the worst technological games, the worst technological failures I think I ever seen in gaming. Unless something gets to that ire, unless we get like a microtransaction where you're locked out of the story and it's super egregious, all of this ire is just really about a studio that has made award-winning games, and that's it. Like, what are you mad about other than that? Like, just real talk, like, let's be mad about some real shit versus this.